Okay, hello, I am back. I barely took a break. I probably should have because my throat gets dry and scratchy, but I just get into talking about it and I'm on a roll. And last one we left off talking about the elements and we really started to talk about them a bit more and why and the colors and where they fit. And there's so much going on here that has developed over 18 years. It's kind of hard for me sometimes to just jump right in and get back because my mind starts going all over the place about which parts you need to know first to understand this or understand that. Or I finish later and I said, oh, I forgot to say that. Or I forgot to say this. But over time, you'll understand it better, and I just have to kind of keep talking about it. And as things come up and I remember, I say, oh, I can always make another video or redo content later or whatever. I'm just trying to get it out there and put some stuff down on video just to explain it to people a bit and get them more familiar or interested, and whatnot. So last time we finished up with we were talking about these elements and, let's see. Hold on, I'm having a brain blurb here for a minute because I thought I remembered something I wanted to talk about. What was it? Oh, I'm going to throw this in. Totally off track here for a minute, but it just makes an interesting thing to keep this interesting. It makes it, something I meant to say in one of the other videos that I said, oh, let me just mention this real quick. And then we'll get back to the elements and these outside words, which is what we were going to do from the last video. But one thing, if you've noticed and you've been following this or look at the chart a bit, some of these words may or may not be familiar to people. And there's a few in here that are kind of very wordsmithy and come from certain sources. And I wanted to make a quick comment on that. If you notice down here in the neuroscience area, there's this interesting word, thinkodynamics, which most people have probably never heard of that phrase, thinkodynamic. And similarly, right here, you'll see this, which is statistical mentalics. So what are thinkodynamics and statistical mentalics? I know we're totally off track here, but I just thought it would be interesting to throw it in for those who are paying attention or who saw those words and said, what the heck is thinkodynamics and statistical mentalics? So when I was originally filling in the circle with all these words on the inside, they populated and grew more and more over time. But at different times in how I shuffled things, there was kind of a weak spot down here where I didn't have as many terms that felt right, or it was kind of empty. It wasn't that it was weak. It was just empty. There weren't as many words to fill out this part of the circle. And that always left me feeling like, well, because it's like, well, how many different subtopics of neuroscience are there? And it just didn't spread around the circle as much. There wasn't as much material to go in here at first, or kind of in this area too. And so I was having trouble filling it out with words that really made me feel confident about what was there or what was associated with that area. And at one point along the way, I had come across a book called I Am Strangeloop by Douglas Hofstadter. And that's a really interesting book. You should check it out if you're interested, or if you look it up and it looks like that's something you're interested in. But it's called I Am Strangeloop. And in that book, one of the things that he talks about that is very relevant to this circle, and that I've heard, there's few people who understand it the way he did, that I've read. I'm sure other people do, but I'd never come across anybody who quite understood it like he did. So there's something in the sciences where you'll often hear the sum is greater, or the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? In chemistry, you put two atoms together, for example, like salt is sodium chloride. Well, sodium will kill you, and chloride is chlorine is a poison. If you just have chlorine gas, you're going to die. But when you put sodium and chloride together, you get table salt, which we eat, and it's fine. The whole is different than the sum of the parts. Take water, for example, H2O. Well, hydrogen's a flammable gas, and oxygen is what you need for combustion. But when you put them together, you get the thing that puts fire out, water. So the whole... So, in the world and nature, it seems to work that a bunch of small things and their qualities and characteristics can combine in such a way to create an object that's larger, that has different qualities and characteristics. And in physics, we look at this, specifically in nuclear science, where you have the nuclear rest mass and its, the difference between... I did it on the cuff. It's been 20 years. I should have thought about it before I made the video. But I'm trying to remember what it was. But when you come to the nucleus, there's something where the whole is different than the sum of the parts in nuclear physics, where there's a mass gap between the particles in the nucleus, and then when you either fizz or fuse them. And you'll notice that there's a difference in that mass as they act, and that's where the energy is either taken in or given off. That difference in the energy is how we have nuclear fission and fusion. And again, the whole is different than the sum of the parts. And so, in this book, the I Am Strange Loop by Douglas Hofstadter, he talks about how emergence can happen from things on a certain scale where they grow and they get bigger, but then the thing that emerges has different qualities completely than the sum of the parts, basically. And he does a really elegant job at it. And during his conversation about all that stuff, he draws some parallels between physics and psychology. And in these categories that he's talking about that emerge. And once I read the words, and I haven't read that book in years, I'd have to go back and point out, but it's excellent. For the words thinkodynamics and statistical mentalics. So in physics, we have thermodynamics. Well, he said, well, what's kind of the analog in psychology was thinkodynamics. And it's how certain things in psychology flow and ebb and flow and create pressure systems between each other. But he draws some wonderful parallels in there. And same with statistical mechanics. Well, you can have statistical mentalics, which is all, imagine the parallel of statistical mechanics into psychology, where you're plotting all these thoughts and ideas and how they relate to each other and, this and that. So I don't want to go into that too much more here. I want to get back to our topic. But I just felt like mentioning that because, so if you saw these words, check out his book. And that's where these words come from, thinkodynamics and statistical mechanics. They're psychological analogs to things that you find in physics that he does a much better job at explaining than I can here real quick. I'd have to go refresh myself. But when I saw them, I said, those are the words I'm missing for that area. And they fit in, when you read his definitions of them, they fit in really good over here with neuroscience and some of the studies of those, the analytic and qualitative and quantitative study of psychology. Okay, so let's jump back to the elements now. And like I said, these are on the fly, so I'm just talking about what I want to talk about at this point. I've covered most of the basics in the other videos. Now we're going to get into some of the nuance and more of the nuance. So over time, I really like to associate Earth with chemistry, and Earth is cold, and what it means to be solid and matter is to be frozen and to be cold. And what it means to be fire is hot. And air dries things and water wets things. And when you do the cross of like earth and water, you get life. That's where life is. Water and fire, that's steam. That's like the humanities stuff. Is man-made steam engines, and we make steam. Well, nature makes steam too, but it's a good analog to, like steampunk and man-made stuff. And fire and air is light. Light literally is kind of the fire in air that we see. And air and earth is dust. And light brightens things and dust dims things, and life is damp and steam is humid. So we created these secondary elements, and their quality, like earth is cold. Then we put the seasons on. And we said winter is cold and spring is wet and summer is hot and autumn is airy or windy. And so, let's see. So where do we go from here? So I want to talk about these outside words before I run out of time in this video. And then I don't know if I'll be done here. I might make one more. Otherwise, I'll bring up the next chart, and we'll see if we transition to that from this one. But, so now that we got all this chart down and you start to fill in the words and you get more and more familiar with these and you notice these patterns that start to emerge, well, then you'll notice that there's some really big generalizations that occur. And obviously the biggest two are, I noticed from that basic start of physics, chemistry, and biology, those are your natural sciences. So this is nature over here. This side of the graph is clearly all the natural stuff. Where when you get into like sociology and arts and crafts and symbols, well, that's what man does. Those are all man-made things. And this is the human side of things. So obviously you've seen these words there the whole time. It's pretty evident at this point, but that's why that's there. This is the natural sciences, and this is the human, sciences, the social sciences. And people have argued. They said, I've heard people discuss, is psychology a hard science or not? I used to hear that discussion when I was in school, and people would say, no, it's philosophy. Oh, it's soft science. Oh, it's kind of a science. Oh, it's... And I think this chart this infographic makes it make a lot of sense that way. It kind of is a hard and a soft science. Psychology is that cross between, the hard natural sciences and the soft human sciences, and that makes sense. And same with language and math. Language is more like the human side of it, and math is more like the natural, the language of nature side of it, and humans are what use language to communicate. So language and math in and of themselves are kind of like a hard and a soft science. So I think that fits really good that you notice that nature is over here and human is over here. But once I did that, I noticed quickly that, okay, well, chemistry is broken down into organic and inorganic. And if you think of physics and foundations and existence and the dust and the material, so chemistry and earth and cold and winter are all over here. And when something's over here like this, you can kind of say it starts catty corner or somewhere in here and goes to either the other corner or somewhere in here, depending on what you're talking about. But, getting off track. What was I saying? Hold on. Check my time while I'm remembering. Okay, good. Oh, so that you'll notice that this is mostly inorganic stuff. And, the topics of physics and all that, it's just the foundations. How does everything work? The mechanics. This is inorganic. Got your material science. That's all inorganic over here. And obviously when you get towards life, that's all the organic stuff. And so in nature, you have your inorganic nature and your organic nature. So I think that really splits the categories of nature. So this top is inorganic and this is organic. And if you're going to have that, then you need the corollary for the human side of things. So what are the, when you think of inorganic and organic, when you talk about human sciences, you use, art, you study art, if you take an art class, one of the first things you learn in art class is form versus function. If you take Art 101 in college, they'll teach you form versus function. And how much of something is aesthetic and how much of something do you need to function. And what is the purpose of art and this and that. And I said, well, form is obviously like inorganic and function is more like the organic part. And it seems to fit really well. Function is how we function as humans, all the society stuff, the politics, the law, your religion, your businesses. That's how we function. That's the function of things. Your crafts, arts and crafts. Crafts is down here. Usually they're made for, now there's hobbies and crafts, but I'm talking more about like blacksmithing and metalworking and leatherworking. The crafts are made to create something that functions. Whereas the arts are made for form. They're for aesthetic and entertainment, and they're mostly made to capture the form of something, getting to the symbols and what information does it hold and what form does it take. So that's these, biggest words here, form and function. So this is your form quadrant. This is your inorganic quadrant. And obviously function and organic kind of go together, and inorganic and form go together. And that's a nice split there. So I think at this point I've covered all the words on the circle around the outside, the colors, the elements. I haven't touched on every topic in here because that gets tedious, or you just have to start to say, well, why is that there? And that really helps if you go back and look at all the previous iterations of this, which I might post at one point. You can find them on X if you follow my links to X. And you'll see how they've all shuffled into those places. But we're doing good on time here. I'm going to finish this up and keep this as a little shorter one. And from here, I'm going to talk about what we can transition into and what else we can talk about related to this circle, because there's actually a lot more going on here than I've even shown you yet. This is just the original one, the academic version of how this thing this whole thing started. And I feel like there's more I want to say, but then it just comes out convoluted, so I'll wait until it naturally comes out about like why things are where they are and the colors and the elements. But I have to kind of just do it as, until I get feedback or people have specific questions or whatnot. So I might just leave this off here. I'm going to give myself a second to think, just to think about if there's anything else I want to say. Otherwise, we'll finish this off. And I'll have to kind of determine where I want to go from here. I think I know what I'm going to do next. Let me just think for a second here. If there's anything else I really want to say about this, the generalities. And I think these first 7 videos or 8 videos have, I think this is the 8th one actually, have really caught, most of the basics of this circle and where it started and how it works. So, yeah. Is there anything else I want to say here right now? I think I'm going to leave it at that. I can always start another one. But I will transition into what we're going to talk about. So, now that you understand the basics of this circle, how it all forms from the eight category words, this was my original endeavor, this academic infographic / alchemical graphic of connecting all of the topics in human knowledge, kind of a word cloud. Where do they fit on this premise of going around the 8? And I just liked it more and more over time of how all these subtleties just seem to fit in. And it seems to make these nice quadrants and patterns and 8ths and 16ths that really just, organize everything in a very nice fashion and make it really, really easy to start learning these topics and breaking it down in a way that your mind can memorize and organize it all. But my background is a polymath in many different topics. Physics, math was one of them. But another one of my big interests in life throughout time was gaming and games. And I grew up on, Atari and Nintendo and Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering and things like that. And so once I had this system and I had the elements on it a long time ago, at some point during the way, I said, I want to make a universal game system based off of this knowledge system, based off of this universal circle, this academic system. And so I eventually created a board game based off of this circle and a universal gaming system for paper games or board games or other things. And once you see that, that'll really drive home a lot of how and where these things are. And it starts to make more and more sense. You can go, wow, this stuff really does line up in different ways. Once you sit with it for a while. And I guess there's a few other things I could mention real quick. I'm not going to get back into it now because I do want to end, or else I'm just going to be longer anyway. But I had mentioned it a couple videos ago, and it's too hard for me to just jump into right here and make it make sense without kind of pre-planning it. But there are a lot of things that happen on this circle with like complements. Like you'll notice similarities between like things in this area and things in this area over here, or things down here and things up here. Like, for example, there's a lot of comparison between like logic and semantics and like philosophy and learning, And so there's a reason, not a reason, but it happens that way, that there's this neat correspondence of complements by complement, like in a color wheel, things that are opposite of each other. And so if you take time to start studying these inside words, you'll notice a lot of the words complement each other on the other side of the circle. And I guess I'll end with this. Now, this is 2D, and I thought about making it 3D at one time, and that kind of overcomplicates things. But I do use a trick in my head often where I think of this going behind itself in like a globe. And if you want, and I guess I will take another minute or two, and this will make it about 20 minutes, and then I'll end there. The same way we combined words in the beginning, like physics and chemistry was physical chemistry, and physics and biology is biophysics. Then the natural question comes up, well, what is physics and sociology? Or any two that you cross that are opposite each other kind of quickly leads you to the middle. And they are complements, but they're also opposites. So, physics isn't really like sociology. I mean, you can ask, what's the physics of sociology or what's the sociology of physics? But that's kind of a real abstraction at that point. Or what's the arts and crafts of chemistry? Or what's the chemistry of arts and crafts? Or it's like math and art. It's like paint by numbers or something. But it gets harder and harder to do opposites and make it make sense in one way. Until you realize that there is a way to that when you spread these things out and you look at just one area, which I used to do on my website, those complements that I was talking about, for example, semantics and logic and philosophy and learning and whatnot, there are complements that are directly across from each other, and there are complements that are like kind of catty corner from each other. And if I was to take this like physics here and stitch it behind the circle over to sociology, you'd see the complements between things, or if I take this top side and stitch it down to here, you'd see the complements between things like statistical mechanics and thermodynamics and thinkodynamics and statistical mentalics. Or, why alchemy is over here when that's traditionally the metallurgical transmutation of lead into gold. But the original process of alchemy also had to do with philosophy and spirituality and learning and ingesting these chemicals. And it was a process of physical alchemy to the self. And the changing yourself, which goes over here to occultism. The original alchemy was all occult and hidden knowledge that only people who knew how to read and write and priests and stuff had. So I'll end on that because we're past 20 minutes, but I hadn't quite touched on that there is a connection between the opposites where you'll see the complement structure to this whole circle. So let me end on that and cut this off before it gets any longer. But what you'll probably see next is a different picture. And we're going to take this circle now that you're familiar with it, and I'm going to show you the next picture, which I could probably make 5 or 8 videos on, which is the universal game system based off this circle. So I'll leave it with that. Here you go for the circle of knowledge. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave comments or ask questions. And I'm going to cut this off short, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.